Hey everyone, welcome to Home Cooking with Foodland. We're happy to have you here. We hope you guys had fun last week. We did burgers and the garlic fries. It was really good, and I've spent the last week trying to work off the burgers that I ate, but it was worth it. This week we're gonna do something fun, and like we talked about, we wanted to do something that was a little bit more, I guess, local style, and we decided to go and do something that's Korean or Korean inspired. And I am not Korean. So I did consult with someone that was Korean and her mother, and I believe they're watching tonight. So shout out to Helen and Helen's mom. Hi. And they helped me with this. We did have a recipe for this on our website, but I talked with her and we kind of updated a little bit. So we're gonna have fun with it. We're gonna be making kimchi stew. I'm gonna try to say it right. It's kimchi Jigae. And we're also gonna make kimchi pancakes, which I'm gonna try this too, is Chee Jeon. And so it's also the Chee Jeon is in the same family as what we know as meat jeon, right? So I think it'll be a fun one to make here. And we're looking forward to the class. If you have questions, again, use the Q&A function, and Cheryl will shout them out to me like she does with great energy. And we'll have fun. Please ask lots of questions because, again, I enjoy the conversation. So let's get started. We'll start with the jjigae, and then while that's cooking, then we'll move into the pancakes. And so we'll start with the prep on that. The first thing I'm going to prep here is I got some onions. I got mushrooms. These are local, right? These are hamakuali mushrooms, and they're really, really beautiful and delicious. So I'll get these prepped up. We'll slice these up. So I'm taking these, and the whole thing is edible. For me though, the bottom part where it's growing is a little firm, so I'm gonna cut that off, but the rest of it is good to go. So I'll trim a little bit off here, and then we're gonna slice these down. So quiet, everyone. Okay, so I'm slicing that. The next thing we're gonna move into is, and I never thought I would do this, we're gonna put spam in our stew today. And I never would have done it because I felt like if I did this, then I'd be like, people would say I'm not authentic. But the person that told me to put this in is Korean, which makes it legit. So we'll take the lid off. We'll pop the spam out. Let it slide out there. We'll do some quick slicing here. I'm cutting these about, I would say, just a little over a quarter of an inch thick. This is probably the same slice size that I would do if I was making spam musubis. I'm gonna guess I got 10 slices. I got 9. Okay, so I got 9 solid slices out of this. And then we're gonna cut those into strips.
I'm so sorry. I have questions for you, Keoni.
Great, love it.
Did you wash your mushrooms?
I did not wash these mushrooms. And so I do not typically, mushrooms are a tricky thing. Mushrooms are like a sponge. And so there's a debate back and forth whether you should wash them or not. A lot of people just if you're using a quarter, will brush them off. But if you wash them, they'll suck up all that water, and lots of times it makes them hard to cook. In this instance, these are grown in a sterile environment. And so for me, I'm okay not washing them. Plus, I'm gonna put them in the soup, and the soup's gonna cook them, which means that I'm gonna be okay.
And can you substitute the mushrooms with enoki mushrooms or white button mushrooms?
Enokis are great. White buttons would work well. I think enokis are, I feel like they're better. Enoki, shimeji, any of the the hon shimeji varieties would work great. But yeah, whatever mushroom you have, the darker the mushroom, the meatier the flavor is going to be. So I think you want to keep that in mind. If you want a lighter flavor, look for a lighter mushroom or a white mushroom.
If you used enoki mushrooms, would you slice it?
If they're the small ones, I would just cut the bottom off and I would leave them whole and just throw them in like that. Okay, we're gonna put some green onions. I'm gonna take 2 of these. Let me rinse them off real quick. These I'm gonna rinse. The reason I'm rinsing these is because I'm just trying to get up if there's any soil. I'm gonna cook them, I'm okay with that, but I don't want the soil to go into the stew. So I'll take that off, we'll cut them into strips. And then on the other side, I have some pork. These are the key ingredients that we're gonna put in here. And then of course we have kimchi. The recipe is calling for 2 cups. I'm gonna eyeball this thing. But here, take a look at this, Chastity. You wanna resume it here. What I did was I have 3 bottles of kimchi, and this is high max kimchi, distributed by our friend Mike Irish from Hom's Kimchi. To me, this is one of the, I like this kimchi relative to other varieties out there because it's got the most like kimchi flavor in there, and it's some of the other ones are so light that they're more like pickled cabbage. This is like got a lot of chili in there. So, but one thing I did was, like in the notes, is this thing's been sitting out in our just unrefrigerated for the last 2.5 days. And earlier today, if you looked in here, you could see the bubbles on here. I'm trying to get this fermentation going. I'm trying to get it to get a much stronger flavor, because that's what's going to help make this kimchi stew delicious. And if you happen to have kimchi in the fridge that you've had for a long time, it's also going to mature, and you're looking for a nice mature kimchi so you can get that rich flavor into your stew. So I'm going to bring the pot here. Actually, it's been lightly heating, but we're going to put all of the ingredients in here, and we're going to layer them in the pot. Okay. Got my onions, my mushrooms. I'll put my Spam in there. And I also have pork. Now you can get a pork butt and you can slice it up, or you can get, pork sirloin. Pork belly would probably work great. You just gotta be careful, make sure the skin cooks down long enough. One of the things when we started the cooking class, we wanted to try to find ways. The idea was, hey, you gotta cook dinner at home, and we want to do something that doesn't take a long time. So I picked up a pack of our fresh chopped pork, and so the butcher guys will take different cuts of meat, and they'll make, basically it's for stir fry or adobo or whatever you want, but it's already pre-cut, ready to go. And so I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put that in.
Question about kimchi.
Yes.
Does it go bad? Can it go bad?
I don't think kimchi can go bad. I've never, basically you're eating something that's fermented. And that's one of the things that they talk about, the great sort of the probiotic nature that it has, right? It's good for digestion. So you're eating a fermented product. What happens as a kimchi just kind of ages over time is it gets further fermented, it changes in flavor. It's almost like, if you think of what wine, right? As wine ages, the character of the wine changes. The same thing happens with kimchi. When it's younger, it's brighter, it's lighter, and over time, as it ferments more, you get all these different other flavors that come together, and it matures. So that's how I look at kimchi. And I think I could be wrong, but, and all of you people that, anyone that's, Helen, if you're on there, I believe they sell kimchi in Korea you can get it by different ages, right? They age it, and you can purchase it in different ways, like you would think about like a balsamic. So this is I said the recipe is 2 cups. I like a lot of kimchi, so I'm gonna put a little bit more. I'm gonna put maybe about 3 cups. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add, you can add water. I'm gonna add stock. We're gonna go to the stove now. I'm gonna add stock because I'm always trying to build flavor. And so by adding stock, it allows me to start with something that's got flavor already. You can add water, you could add clam broth, you could add fish broth, but I'm adding stock because this is my universal cooking liquid. And you want to just cover the level of all of the product in here, because you want to make sure it should be a stew. So there should be mostly meaty products in here versus liquid. And I'm gonna get a spoon and we'll stir it up lightly.
Can you tell us again what brand of kimchi you're using today?
The brand of kimchi that I'm using is High Max. There are other brands we have in our store that are also good. Koha makes a nice kimchi that has a really good flavor. I think when you go in the store and you're looking for the kimchi, by the way, you see, as I push down on the vegetables here, let me turn the light on here. As I push down on the vegetables, there's more solid product than there is liquid. The liquid is just covering all this, and that's gonna help really extract all that flavor and give it a really, really nice texture. So we're gonna bring this up to boil. When you go in the store, the kimchi that you're looking for something, a really good kimchi stew or something similar, at least to what you would get in a restaurant, is you're looking for that really dark red color. You want a lot of red in there. If it looks mostly like white vegetables, then it's probably not gonna be have enough of that kimchi flavoring in there to really give you what we're looking for. So now we're gonna bring that up to a boil. It's the nice thing is the stock I was preheating, so I feel like it should this should come up quickly, and then we're gonna bring it to a boil and let it simmer. Now I have tofu in the recipe, and I'm using soft tofu. So what I am gonna do is hold off and put this in at the end, because if I added it now with all the agitation of the boiling, it would break the tofu down too much. Now, if you like to have that texture that the broken tofu gives you, you could add some now. It'll break it up. It'll add body and character to the stew, but then I would save some at the end and cut it up so that you have nicer pieces that are floating into your stew when it's ready to be eaten. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our pancakes now. I preheated the pot, and the reason I did is because I'm trying to keep things moving quickly for our class, but you could start with a cold pot. And technically, because I put raw pork in there, starting with a cold pot's better, because any impurities will gradually start to come out and you can skim them. But I started with a preheated pot, and I preheated the stock just so that it would come up to a simmer quicker. If I were to start with cold, it might take 20, 25 minutes possibly. And I'm trying to get this all done in a specific amount of time for our class. But if you're doing it at home, you can start with cold, and then you can do other things while you're letting that happen.
And can you use roast pork instead
of? You could use roast pork. I mean, if you're trying to think about using stuff that you have in the house, I think you can use that. I think it changes the character a little bit, but I think it would work. It would work fine.
And then when you were leaving the kimchi out, did you close the cap tightly?
No. I unscrewed the cap, because what I'm doing is when I leave it out to ferment, it's breathing and it's bubbling, right? And so I don't want the container to swell. So I unscrewed it so it had room to breathe, and I was able to enjoy the wonderful fragrance of the kimchi as it matured for the last 48 hours.
And why medium? Why tell us medium tofu versus soft tofu versus firm tofu?
Yeah, I'm using soft tofu. I think you can use what your preference is. I'm using soft tofu because for me, when I'm eating the soup, I like that very silky quality of the tofu. If you like a different texture when you eat it, that's fine. But because I'm using the soft, that is also why I'm putting it at the end, because it's so delicate, right? I don't want it to just completely break apart when I start to make, when I finish the soup. So here's our kimchi. I'm adding kimchi into the bowl here for the pancakes. I just rough chopped it. These pieces are between 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. We'll put those in the bowl. And the thing that's cool about what we're gonna do here is this pancake recipe that we're gonna do is it's based off of the kimchi pancake, the Korean kimchi pancake. But if you think about the properties of this, I'm putting solids or vegetables in here, and I'm adding flour and egg and liquid, and I'm going to make a quote unquote cake, right? So, if you were to want to riff on that, you could do zucchini and do all these vegetables, and then you could zucchini kind of a cake. Or one of the things we used to do when I was at the hotel, we would do seared duck breast, and we would do wild rice cakes with ramps in them. So you can really have fun with this once you understand the principle of what we're getting ready to do here. So kimchi is going in. I'm gonna add some onions, some white onion. Yes.
years, and it's aged underground in ceramic.
Thanks,
So-
Helen. Okay, we're gonna come over here. This is another tip from Helen's mom. Okay. So now we've come to a boil, and I've never done this before, but what Helen's mom does, she puts peanut butter in the kimchi stew, and I'm gonna put some in. And she said make sure it comes to a boil first, because it helps dissipate some of the kimchi, the peanut butter smell dissipates quite when it comes to boil. I also think that it's gonna dissolve nicely. And what the peanut butter is gonna do is it's kind of round out some of the edges that you're getting from this very fermented kimchi. It's kind of like if you think about butter in a sauce. I also think about what makes sense to me is when I think of these are roasted peanuts, right? And they're creamy, so it's almost giving me a similar characteristic as if you added, like when you add toasted sesame oil to a dish or sesame seeds, it kind of gives you a similar quality.
Can you use chunky peanut butter?
You can, I think, if you're okay with pieces of peanuts floating in the soup. I would stick to the creamy because I want the whole thing to incorporate into this. Now I'm turning this down to low because I really wanted to just slow cook. I want all the flavors to come together. And if I was rapidly boiling it, that agitation just has a tendency to break everything up.
Leilani has a good question. She asks, when you cook food that has been fermented, does that affect its probiotic benefit and kill the good bacteria?
I'm going to guess, but I would say the probability is yes, because all the live cultures that are in there are getting killed in there. So if you're really concerned about the probiotics in the particular dish, I'd drink some of the kimchi juice and then have that, or have some kimchi first and have that after. So I'm putting the onions in here, sliced onions, quarter cup. Now you could add some kimchi juice, or you could add some shoyu. Now I need the liquid, right? So 5 tablespoons roughly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Green onions. We're gonna add more green onions.
Question about peanut butter, because a lot of people have peanut allergies. Can you
Yeah.
substitute like almond butter, a different kind of butter?
I've not experimented with that, but I think I would say yes, you can experiment with almond butter. I think you could use, if you have tahini paste, that might be really interesting, roasted sesame seeds. I mean, you could also leave it out too. That's another totally viable thing that you could do. Okay, I'm gonna on the onions. I'm gonna, like, you see the length of these the white onions. I'm gonna keep them a relatively similar length, because all this is also all the length of the onions is gonna help to create sort of a spider web or a net, or so that this whole sticks together when it's time to start making our pancakes. Okay, we'll put a little bit of sugar here. By the way, I'm supposed to put a little bit of sugar a little sugar in the stew, so I'm gonna do it real quick.
By the way, Helen, your friend Helen says you can totally leave the peanut butter out.
There you go. I need to have people on more often to like add to this. Thanks, Helen. Okay, egg goes in. And you know, there are kimchi pancake mixes you can buy out there, but the recipe that I'm doing is all separate ingredients, because I wanted to you might not have that in your home, and you might not make it enough so that you go and have this product. So this is kind of how you would do it if you were gonna kind of do it all from scratch. So got the egg in here, got the sugar. I'm gonna add a little bit of baking powder. Baking powder is a leavening, right? That's gonna help give us some rise. So about a ½ teaspoon, I'm gonna eyeball. ½ teaspoon is gonna go in there. Then we're also gonna put all-purpose flour. I have it pre-measured out here. It's about a ½ cup. And then I have this is potato starch. You can use potato starch, tapioca flour, or you can use cornstarch. Now I suppose I've not tried this, but if you only had flour, you could use just straight flour. But one of the things that a pure starch like this does is I think it helps make a crisper, lighter pancake versus the all the gluten that you would get. But you do need the reason you're adding the regular flour is because you do need some of that structure that's going to be created when you get the wheat flour mixed in with the liquid that creates those I can't think of the protein, but you're creating gluten. That's what it is, gluten. So we're now going to go ahead and mix this all together. Oh, one thing you can add, I have some gochujang. If you want to add some of that character, some of that kind of that depth of some heat and some of the depth of that fermented soy, you can add some gochujang into the mix now. And then we're going to go ahead and mix that up. And one thing you want to do too is when you mix this, you got to be careful because it has flour in here. If you over mix it, you run the risk of this becoming kind of really tough and doughy. So I'm just trying to bring it together. And this is where you're going to have to use judgment. You know, there's always variations, and you want it to feel loose and movable. Like this is feeling like it might be a little tight. So I'm going to actually probably come in here with a little bit more liquid. And so you got to pick and choose your liquids, right? I'm going to see if I have any more kimchi juice so I don't have a whole lot to work with here, but I have this new container. Because again, I'm trying to build flavor. Oh, this is going to be good. Some of that juice in there to loosen this up. If you wanted to, you could add water, but remember, water doesn't have flavor. And so the more water you add, the more diluted the product becomes. And that's where you start to run into issues with flavor development. And the thing that we're always concerned about when we're cooking is that flavor development. Okay, still feels like this looks a little tight. I'm gonna add a little shoyu. I think we're getting really close. It should look sandy, you know, like wet sand at the beach, kind of like wet cement, I would say. Maybe it's just a little bit thinner. But you see how as soon as I stir it, it's starting to want to come flatten out. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of that. We'll add more flavor from the juice. Let that sit for a second here. Let me start heating up a pan. We'll come take a look at their soup here. See it nicely simmering. Coming together nicely. Smells really good. Now keep in mind, we still have to add our tofu in here. And if you had more mature kimchi, you had older kimchi, riper kimchi, spicier kimchi, then your stew would be redder. And so that's something that, you know, over time as you do this, if you have preferences, if you want it to be spicier or richer, you can let your kimchi age longer, or you can find different kimchis that have more of that chili sauce in there. We'll go ahead and get some oil in this pan here. I'm still using, from when we did a fried chicken class, I still had some more vegetable oil, so I'm still gonna keep using that. Remember, if you have vegetable oil and you fry a lot and you saute a lot, and you can use a container relatively quickly in, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, I think you're okay. It's a much more economical value. The thing you have to remember is that this kind of a product, it does go rancid. And so you have to make sure you use it in a quick enough time, or else it starts to make all your cooking taste funny. Okay, so here we have our mix.
Keoni, can you fry the Spam before you put it in the pot?
You could fry the Spam before. You could also one of the things you could do if you wanted to is you could heat the pot, put some oil in the pot. You could even lightly brown the pork, and you can lightly brown the spam. It'll add more character because you're starting to get some caramelization. But I think the cool thing is that's when you start to take license and then make something your own. We're gonna let this heat up just a little bit. Take a look at our soup here. I'm gonna taste that, see how it's tasting. It's really good. Wow, my mouth is like water right now. It's really delicious. Okay.
It's too spicy when you taste it
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Can you add water?
You could add water, but you add water, you will listen. The spiciness will go down, but the depth of flavor and umami will also dissipate. So if you felt it was too spicy, for me, what I would consider doing is add more vegetables. You could add wonbok, or if you had any of those like bok choys, you could, bok choy, wonbok, choy sum, you could add that in there to help. You're trying to change the percentages, right? You could add more meat in there, more green onions. If you wanted to, you could add some more stock if you had that. My only concern is by adding the water. You could add more peanut butter. By adding the water, you're also you're just killing, you're just lowering the overall flavor of the stew. Let's see how this is. Is this hot? Okay, it looks good. You see how it's lightly sizzling right there? Now, the recipe that I sent, the method was for big cakes, but I thought it might be fun to make smaller ones because then, they're easier to handle. You don't have to stress out about trying to flip them over. Probably get 3 inside here. You want to gently fry them. Get them nice and colored.
Keoni, can you add sugar to your stew if it's too spicy? Would that be another option?
You can. I mean, I added sugar to this, but there's only so much sugar you can add before it just starts to taste sweet. And that's the tricky part. You don't want it. I don't think you really want to notice that if you're identifying that there is sweet, then you've gone too far, I feel like. So we're gonna let these lightly cook or fry. We're getting our stew simmer here. We can come over here and let's work on some sauce, I think, for dipping. You can make sauce if you I don't think it's necessarily optional, but you could make a sauce for dipping the pancake in. And there's different methods and versions that I've seen out there. But this one's just a real simple one. It's really just a couple of ingredients. I'm gonna put some shoyu in here. Put a little bit of rice wine vinegar. Very similar, kind of a very similar sauce as if you're making gyoza or pot stickers. And I want to add some sesame oil. Let me get some of that real quick. Let's take a look at these pancakes real quick. You see how they puffed up? That's that baking powder acting in there. And one of the things, I was waiting for someone to say, can I use baking soda? And so my answer to that is gonna be, you could try, I have to think about this, but if you're using okay, so let me start again. Baking powder is baking soda with tartaric acid in there, cream of tartar added. And what activates the baking soda to make a leavening is acid. You have to have baking soda and acid for it to do its job. So when you look at the recipe, if you think about all the ingredients, if I had lemon juice in here and I just said add baking soda, then you have acid and baking soda, you're fine. If there's no acid in here, then you have to add, and that's why we use baking powder. I just can't think, I'm trying to think if there's acid in the mix from the kimchi, but I don't think there is. And that's why we're using the baking powder, okay? I'll pull these out. These are a little tad dark, but still think they'll be delicious. I'll turn my heat down just a little bit. Put another batch in here. Another one right here. Trying to make a nice flat layer. And I have these on like actually very low, as you can see here. And once it was nice and heated up, I turned it down quite a bit because I want it to still cook. I want it to be, I'm trying to time the browning and the cooking of the dough and the rising at the same time. If it's too hot, it'll brown too fast and the inside will be raw. If it's not hot enough, it'll just kind of like sit there and soak up all the fat and then it'll just be oily. So that's where you're trying to work the balance between the two. We'll let these go for just a tad more. I'll put some sesame oil in here.
Can you add chopped shrimp?
Yeah, you can. I think traditionally, this is where we're getting to this whole debate, right? I asked, like, could you put carrots in this? And I was told that classically, this does not have that in it, but you could add chopped shrimp in there. So again, it's like the whole spamming your kimchi stew, right? Shrimp could work. The other thing that Helen told me is you could put squid in there. Squid would be good in this. Or calamari. So we'll let those cook nicely. We're actually really, really close. This is so what we're gonna do now is when we're done with these, I'm gonna bring this over. Then I got rice. And we're gonna do a whole plate up. I got the tofu we're gonna add. I'll probably add some fresh green onions in here so that I can kind of get some fresh color in there. And then I'm gonna serve it, and I'm gonna serve the rice on the side of the stew. You don't want to put the rice and the stew on top. They need to be served separately. And one of the things that can really kind of like add some depth and richness to this also is eggs. So we'll do a sunny side up egg. I'll put it on the rice so you can kind of see how this all kind of comes together.
And Keoni, if you add seafood, do you
Yes.
add it in raw, or do you pre-cook the seafood before adding it to the batter?
If I was adding seafood, I would add it raw because this cooks so quickly. If you're doing like squid or if you're doing shrimp, those are delicate shellfish, and so they would cook in the right amount of time. By the time this is done, your shellfish should be done at the same time. If you were to pre-cook it, I worry that you would, by the time that the whole dish comes together, it would be overcooked and it might be tough.
And then if you don't like Spam,
yeah,
and you deleted the Spam from the stew, would that change the flavor? And how would it change the flavor?
It wouldn't be as spammy. You just have just a little bit. You have a little bit less depth of flavor because the Spam has it gives a lot of umami with all the fun secret things that are in Spam, right? Gives you that meatiness. So you wouldn't have some of that, but I still think you would end up with a very delicious stew. One that, tastes great. And again, if you wanted to, you could add a little bit more pork. This one, I could see you adding some shellfish. And I thought about you could potentially, if you really want to kick it up, throw some crab legs in there. If you wanted to put shrimp, what I would do is wait till just before I'm going to serve it, and I would drop the shrimp in, raw shrimp, and I would just let them sit in there with the stove off so that you're lightly poaching them for 5 or 6 minutes, and then they're just cooked through, and they're still tender and juicy when you eat them. So I think there's a lot of ways you could take this and make it your own.
Helen says Spam is just an option. This is typically done with pork.
And so we have the pork in here, and we got our spiced ham, our Spam. So we just kind of reinforced that pork flavor. flip these guys over real quick. I like in this color. See, these are fine. I think they're a little bit dark. This is what I would be. My preference would be like more along the lines of this though. This color here. So we'll let these finish up. We've got our stew looking good here. I'm gonna cut some more onions. I'm gonna put some fresh onions in there just to brighten it up. I feel like you can never have too much green onions. So this is all gonna go inside this in the stew now too. The thing is, so when you think about cooking, right, like we've done with fresh herbs, sometimes like the onions are great. I'll put them in, you get the onion flavor, and now the onions are cooked in and they give a mellow character to it. But I'm taking fresh green onions, I'm throwing in there because I want that vibrancy of the fresh green to still be in there. So I'm building layers of even the onion flavor that's gonna go inside the stew.
Sherry wants to know what kind of spatula you're using and the brand.
So I'm gonna let Cheryl talk to you about the spatula. This spatula, she can tell you all about this spatula. Cheryl?
I forget. You have to read the brand.
So this is a Dream Farm spatula that was given to me for Christmas by Cheryl. So I thought she could tell you about it, but it's great. It's great for, I like it. I happen to like this a lot because it's thin on this side and it's thicker on this side, so I can use it. You see how it bends nicely? So when I cook a lot, and when we cook in restaurants and we're cooking fish, we hold spatulas and fish spatulas like this, not like this. And so it mimics a fish spatula and allows me to do stuff like that very easily, which I like. I'm gonna hide these ones so that you can see that. You can see my darker ones first. But we're gonna let these, they're draining now, they're ready to go. I'm gonna move this pan on the front here. This is my egg pan. And by the way, I don't know what you're like when you cook eggs at home, but I have a pan that's just for eggs. And this is a pan that is Teflon coated, and I don't do anything else in it because it allows me to do sunny side up eggs over easy, and they don't stick. The more I use the pan for other things, the tendency is that that pan gets messed up and it starts to stick. If you work in a hotel or a kitchen, if the breakfast cook finds you using his egg pan for other things, you're in deep trouble.
Colin says he noticed you used the bigger leaf green onions for the pancake. Is it because you're frying it, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter. It just happened to be that I grabbed them. I wasn't specifically trying to pick something. So there's some water I'm gonna pour out. And so for those of you that maybe not that familiar with using tofu, this thing is very delicate right now. And so the way that we're gonna prep this is I'm gonna take a knife and I'm just gonna cut it half in the middle, right down. And then I'm gonna do thirds. I'm gonna go 1, 2, and this one I'm gonna go 4. I'll start in the middle here. Then I'm gonna go half of that and half of that, and I'm good to go. This is so delicate that that's all it needs. If you continue to handle it more than that, then it starts to break up on you. Okay.
Going back to the sauce, can you tell us the ratio of the shoyu, rice vinegar, and sesame oil?
Yeah, I was eyeballing it, so I would say 2/3 shoyu, 1/3 rice wine vinegar, and then a splash of the sesame, and then taste it to see if you like it, and then play with it. You can also put chili flakes in there. You could put, if you want it to be hotter, or you could put some gochujang in there, or you could take like what's the Chinese chili sauce? I can't think of it. Not sriracha. You could put that in there too, but I mean, I want to say nuoc cham, but that's the other thing. I can't think about it. It's the red Chinese chili sauce. It's the oyster. It's the red rooster stuff. Same company that makes sriracha, but they make chili sauce. I can't think of the name. I'm blanking out of that. Okay, so I'm gonna in my Teflon pan. Just for insurance, what I'm also gonna do is I take a little spray of this is avocado spray, but I'm just like lightly coating it so that my egg doesn't stick in there. And I'm also gonna just put a very small amount of fat on top of that, like drops. I'm gonna do a sunny side up egg. Okay.
Sherilyn wants to know the answer to this question. If your pan starts to stick over time, is there anything that can be done to fix it? Oh,
Not
and
really.
sambal is what you're trying to remember. Kalai
Sambal Oleg.
gave us
That was my
answer.
favorite stuff. And by the way, when I moved to New York and I was in cooking school, I could never find it. It's driving me crazy. I used to have it flown over. But yes, sambal. On the pan, if you're talking about a Teflon coating pan, once the pan starts to kind of like it starts to stick, to me, the best thing to do is just get another one. Now, one thing that I'm gonna do is crack the egg into a bowl. And the reason I'm doing that is twofold. One, if I want to sunny side up and I crack the yolk in here, then it doesn't go in there and I have to do something else with it. The other reason I crack it in here is in the event that a shell gets in here, I still can take it out before it goes in the pan and have to like stick around and try to scoop it out. So that's one of those things that you can do to kind of help make sure, unless you're like egg cracking pro. So this is gonna go in. I'm gonna do one sunny side up egg. I'm gonna turn it down to low. Lightly seasoned with a little salt, little tiny bit of pepper. We're gonna let it do its thing.
And can you explain to us why you sprayed the pan and then dropped the oil?
Because for me, sometimes spraying the pan isn't quite enough, and I don't want to just like drench the thing with spray. So it's like double insurance. If you're really good and your pan's super bright, this pan is like 23 years old. So, you know, I need to give it a little bit of extra. If your pan's brand new, you probably can just spray it and you're good. Or if you have one of those green pans or whatever, you're probably totally fine. That was just insurance for me. But I just put a few drops because I didn't need that much. I just needed a little bit. And see, look at that. See, it's starting to it still wants to fight with me just a little bit. So I'll use my happy spatula and kind of like remind it who's boss, and I'm good. So now we have our rice that was just cooked. And by the way, one of the things I want to mention, I never used to believe this and it matters. And I've talked to many people that it totally matters. And everyone, you're all gonna say, well, we knew that, but I didn't. Okay. So soaking the rice matters. And by soaking the rice, it allows the rice to hydrate and cook more evenly. So this rice that I'm making here, I soaked from this morning, and it's giving me a nice fluffy texture, and it keeps the grains separate. So that it does matter. The other thing is, you also should not just take it for granted that rice, as an example, this kind of rice is 1-to-1 ratio. If it's new harvest, the rice grains, and the bag will say new harvest, the rice grains have more moisture in them, so they might need a little bit less than a 1-to-1 ratio. If the rice is older, as it gets older and older and older, it dries out more. So it may need a little bit more than a 1-to-1 ratio. And the only way you're gonna know that is if you start to work with the rice, you can start with your 1-to-1 and see if it's coming out too dry or too wet, and then adjust from there. But that's really, that 1-to-1 is a, I guess we call it a baseline. Okay, so egg looks good to me. Now, the reason I'm doing the egg is the yolk is a lot. This yolk has fat, and when you think about mayonnaise, it's yolks and it's oil. Or you think about, I'm trying to think of, when you make vanilla sauce, you think about ice cream. The yolks, the fat in that is what makes the dish rich. And so this is gonna make my eating experience of the stew nice and rich. So I'm gonna put a little bit here on my rice. And then I'm gonna bring my stew over here so you can see it. And it's looking really, really good. By the way, I think we're kind of close to wrapping this up. So if there are any other questions, perfect time to be asking them. But this is looking nice and flavorful. You can see all of the onions and the kimchi and the pork and the spam in there. Now I'm going to add some of, remember I like to use this, my trusty wok, because see how my Chinese cleaver, because see how it's good at lifting stuff up. It's like a scraper. But I'm going to add some of it now. And I'm going to stir it in, and it's going to start to break up, which I'm okay with, because as some of this tofu breaks up, it's adding body to the soup here. I'm going to add a little bit more. And it's looking really nice and luxurious right about now. I'm gonna go ahead and serve some. You can see it. It looks really, really delicious. Well, I put a few pieces of tofu in there, just some bigger pieces, just so that you can kind of see it in there. And then the other thing that you want to eat is you want more, just like this adds more character, more flavor, more seasoning, more texture, more complexity. We have some seasoned organic roasted seaweed. So we'll put that on the side. Put some over here. Serve on the rice. You can with the rice or on a plate on the side.
Richard wants to know if you can put in long rice.
You could. You're creating a new dish, but yeah, you can totally add long rice to that. Be interesting. And so here we have our kimchi pancakes. We have our kimchi stew with the accompaniment, which is fresh rice, a fried egg, seasoned seaweed or nori. And here you have it. This is a wonderful, simple meal you can do. Two things you can do with kimchi. Great for parties here. Great for a nice cold evening. Kind of like feed your soul, kind of warm you up. And there you go. Are there any other last minute questions? All right, well, oh, one more question? No?
Thank you.
We're good? Well, I hope you guys all make this. It's super fast. Like if you're just gonna make the stew, right? Throw it all in, throw it in the pot, take a shower, come back, time to eat. We hope you guys learned something, you had fun, and we'll see you next week, 5 o'clock, for more Home Cooking with Foodland. Bye now.